The mountains were covered in thick snow, and a bitter wind swept across the hills. The trees were heavy with snow, and the path that led through the valley was almost invisible. The town nearby was quiet, as most people stayed indoors to escape the harsh winter. Only a few brave souls dared venture out, and among them was a cowboy named Jack. He was known in the town for his courage and his kind heart. Jack had been checking on his cattle earlier in the day, making sure none of them were lost or trapped in the snow. He had always been used to hard work. But today, the storm was fiercer than he expected. Jack rode his horse steadily, his coat wrapped tightly around him, and his hat pulled low to keep the snow out of his eyes. He had traveled this path many times before, but the storm made everything unfamiliar. The mountains, which usually seemed safe, now looked dangerous, and the wind whispered through the trees like a warning. Jack's eyes scanned the white landscape, looking for signs of trouble, when suddenly he noticed something unusual in the distance. A figure was stumbling through the snow, struggling to move. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but as he got closer, he realized it was a woman. She was small and delicate, and her clothes were soaked with snow. She looked exhausted, her movements slow and weak. Without thinking twice, Jack urged his horse forward. The snow made the ride difficult, each step sinking into the deep white powder, but he pushed on. He called out to her, his voice strong but calm. The woman heard him and tried to lift her head, but she was shivering so badly that she could hardly respond. Jack reached her just as she collapsed to her knees, unable to go any further. He quickly dismounted and knelt beside her, gently lifting her into his arms. She felt fragile and cold, almost as if the snow had taken all her warmth. Jack wrapped his coat around her and held her close to his chest, trying to share his body heat with her. The woman's lips were blue, and her teeth chattered from the cold. Jack carried her carefully through the snow, guiding his horse as best as he could. The journey to his cabin was long and slow, but he refused to leave her alone in the storm. His cabin was not far, but the snow made the path treacherous. Every step was a challenge, and Jack had to balance the safety of his horse with the safety of the woman in his arms. He murmured words of encouragement to her, though he knew she might not hear them through the howling wind. Still, he wanted her to feel that she was not alone, that someone cared about her well-being. When they finally reached the cabin, Jack wasted no time. He brought her inside and set her down by the fire. The warmth hit her like a wave, and she shivered violently before finally relaxing a little. Jack removed her wet clothes carefully, replacing them with dry blankets and warm clothing he kept for emergencies. He made her sit close to the fire, pouring her a cup of hot tea to help her regain some strength. The woman drank slowly, her hands trembling as she held the cup. She looked around the cabin, taking in the simple, rough wooden furniture and the smell of burning wood. Everything felt safe, and for the first time in hours, she felt she could breathe. Jack sat across from her, watching her carefully. He could see that she was still very weak, but he also noticed a spark of determination in her eyes. It was as if she had been through something terrible, but refused to give up. Jack admired that strength silently, though he did not speak of it. He simply made sure she had everything she needed: blankets, hot food, and a safe place to rest. Outside, the storm continued to rage, snow piling higher and higher, but inside there was warmth and safety. Jack stayed close by, ready to help at a moment's notice, and the woman slowly began to regain some color in her cheeks. After a while, the woman managed to speak. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried a hint of relief. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me." Jack nodded, his expression calm and reassuring. "You're safe now," he said. "The storm won't get you here. Just rest, and we'll figure everything else later." The woman looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude, but also something else, curiosity. She wanted to know who he was, why he had risked his life to save a stranger, but the words did not come easily. She was still shivering, still scared of what might happen next. Jack gave her time. He knew that trust could not be forced, and that the woman needed space to feel safe. He prepared some food, simple but hearty, and sat quietly while she ate. He noticed small details, the way her hands shook slightly, the way she looked out the window at the snowstorm, as if she were both relieved and anxious. Jack could sense that her story was not an easy one, but he did not press. He believed that everyone had their own struggles, and some things needed to be shared in their own time. For now, all that mattered was that she was alive and warm. As the hours passed, the woman began to relax more. She wrapped herself in the blankets Jack had provided and sat close to the fire, letting the warmth seep into her bones. She started to speak a little, telling small pieces of her journey, though she avoided the more painful parts. Jack listened patiently, never interrupting, offering a comforting presence. There was something about him that made her feel safe, even though they had just met. She did not know him, yet she trusted him enough to let down some of her walls. It was a rare feeling, one that came from knowing that someone genuinely cared without expecting anything in return. Outside, the storm continued. Relentless and unforgiving, but inside the cabin there was a quiet peace. Jack checked the fire, made sure the woman had enough blankets, and kept an eye on the sky through the window. He knew that storms like this could last for days, and he was prepared to keep her safe for as long as necessary. The woman, feeling a little stronger now, finally allowed herself to rest. She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope. She knew that she had been lucky, perhaps even destined, to be found by someone like Jack. Night fell, and the storm outside grew even more intense. Jack stayed nearby, keeping the fire burning and checking on her every now and then. He did not speak much, but his presence was enough. The woman felt a quiet comfort in knowing that someone cared so deeply for her safety. She thought about how different her life had been until this moment, how alone and scared she had felt, and now, here was a stranger who risked everything to save her. It was overwhelming, but it also filled her with gratitude. By the time the storm began to subside, the woman had regained some strength. She could sit upright, move around the cabin a little, and even smile faintly at Jack. He noticed the change, a relief spreading across his face. He knew that she was still fragile, but he also knew that she was strong enough to survive, to move forward, and perhaps even to trust again. The snowstorm that had once seemed like an enemy had now become a bridge that brought two lives together in an unexpected, extraordinary way. Jack and the woman stayed up late that night, talking quietly by the fire. They shared small stories of their past, laughter, and silent moments of reflection. The storm had brought them together, and neither of them could ignore the bond forming between them. It was the beginning of something new, something neither had expected, but both felt was important. The night passed slowly, and when the first light of dawn crept through the window, both were ready to face whatever came next, together. The morning light crept gently through the small window of Jack's cabin, scattering pale beams across the wooden floor. Outside, the storm had lessened, leaving the world covered in soft, glistening snow. The mountains looked peaceful now, but the memories of the blizzard lingered. Jack stood by the fire, tending to the warmth that had kept the woman safe through the long night. She sat wrapped in a thick blanket, her eyes slowly opening as she watched the fire flicker. There was a quiet moment between them, filled with the weight of everything they had survived together. Jack could see the fatigue in her eyes, the exhaustion that came from more than just the snowstorm. He offered her a small, reassuring smile. You rested well? He asked gently. The woman nodded, though her movements were still cautious. Her voice was soft as she replied, Yes, thank you. I feel better now. She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. I should explain why I was out there. I don't want you to think I was careless. Jack shook his head, waving her concerns aside. No need to explain right now. You're safe. And that's what matters. But she persisted, her curiosity and fear pushing her forward. She took a deep breath, then began to tell him bits of her story. She spoke of a long journey through towns and forests, a journey meant to escape a past she did not want to follow her anymore. She told him about traveling alone, moving quietly to avoid attention, and surviving with only the essentials she could carry. Her words were measured, each one revealing bravery and determination. Jack listened attentively, noticing the resilience in her voice. Even though she seemed delicate, there was a strength beneath the surface that made him respect her deeply. As she spoke, Jack realized how alone she must have felt during her travels. The mountains, the snow, the endless silence. All of it could have been terrifying for someone on their own. He felt a mixture of admiration and concern. Here was a woman who had faced the world's dangers without anyone by her side, and yet she had survived. She glanced at him, sensing his thoughts. I didn't want to trouble anyone, she said quietly. I wanted to keep moving, keep away from problems I couldn't handle. Jack nodded, understanding that feeling all too well. Life could be harsh, but it also required courage to face it head-on. For a while, neither spoke. The crackling fire filled the cabin with warmth and comfort. Outside, the wind still howled occasionally, rattling the window panes. But inside, there was a peaceful bubble that separated them from the storm's fury. Jack prepared some breakfast, simple food but nourishing, bread, eggs, and hot coffee. He set a plate in front of her, and she ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it were the first meal she had truly enjoyed in days. Jack watched quietly, feeling a strange sense of fulfillment. He had saved her life, yes, but the small acts, feeding her, keeping her warm, making her feel safe, seemed to matter just as much. As the morning passed, the woman began to relax further. She looked around the cabin, noticing small details she hadn't before. The worn furniture, the stacks of firewood, the quiet strength in Jack's movements. She realized he lived a life of hard work and simple pleasures, one rooted in honesty and care. She found herself intrigued by him, not just because he had rescued her, but because of the calm, steady presence he brought into a world that had been chaotic and frightening. For the first time in a long time, she felt she could breathe freely without constantly fearing the next danger. Jack, on the other hand, found himself drawn to her without fully understanding why. There was something about the way she carried herself, even in fear and exhaustion, that spoke to him. He admired her bravery, the determination in her eyes, and the quiet dignity with which she faced the world. He didn't say much, but his actions, the warmth of the fire, the careful way he handed her food, the soft voice he used to speak to her, communicated more than words ever could. It was a silent understanding between them, a trust that had been forged in the snowstorm's harsh conditions. The woman eventually shared more details about her journey. She had come from a small town far to the south, traveling through dangerous forests and frozen hills. She had been avoiding people who wanted to cause her harm, and her path had been fraught with near misses and moments of fear. Each story she told painted a picture of someone who had endured much, but refused to give up. Jack listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes offering quiet encouragement. "You've been very brave," he said once, and she gave him a faint smile, a mixture of gratitude and acknowledgement. As the day went on, their conversation drifted to lighter topics. They spoke of the mountains, the animals, and the simple joys of life in the remote town. She told him about small pleasures she missed from her old life, like listening to birds in the morning or feeling the sun on her face. Jack shared stories of his days tending to cattle, riding through forests, and living close to the land. There was a rhythm to their dialogue, a natural ebb and flow that made time pass quickly. The woman found herself laughing softly at a story Jack told about a mischievous calf, and for a moment she felt a happiness she hadn't known in a long time. Despite this growing comfort, there was still an unspoken tension between them. Jack noticed that the woman moved carefully, avoiding certain topics, and he sensed a secret she was keeping. He didn't push her. Instead, he continued to show kindness, knowing that trust had to be earned. The woman, meanwhile, felt a strange mix of fear and relief. She had been alone for so long that opening up to someone, even a man who had saved her life, felt risky. Yet there was something about Jack that made it feel safe. He was patient, respectful, and genuine, qualities she hadn't encountered in years. As the afternoon wore on, Jack offered to show her around the cabin and the small yard outside. The snow had settled into a sparkling blanket, and the world looked peaceful after the storm. She stepped outside hesitantly, feeling the crunch of snow beneath her boots. Jack guided her gently, showing her how to avoid icy patches and pointing out the tracks left by animals during the storm. They walked side by side, the cold air biting at their cheeks, but the shared experience brought a quiet connection between them. It was a simple moment, yet it felt significant, as though the storm had not only saved her life, but also brought them together. Returning to the warmth of the cabin, the woman began to feel a sense of safety she hadn't known in years. She realized that Jack's actions were not just about duty, they were about genuine care. The way he had risked his own safety to save her, the way he had tended to her without asking anything in return, and the quiet patience he showed all pointed to a man of remarkable character. She felt a growing admiration for him, and alongside it, a sense of hope for the future. Perhaps, she thought, there could be more to life than fear and running. As night fell, the woman sat close to the fire once more, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. Jack checked on her regularly, ensuring she was comfortable and safe. The quiet moments between them were filled with unspoken understanding. They didn't need words to convey what had happened. The bond formed in the snowstorm spoke for itself. It was a beginning, fragile yet strong, and both of them sensed that their lives had changed forever. Outside, the world remained blanketed in snow. But inside, there was light, warmth, and a sense of possibility. By the end of the day, the woman felt a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. She was tired from the storm, from the journey, and from opening up after so long, but she also felt a sense of relief. She had survived the blizzard, found shelter, and met someone who cared deeply for her well-being. Jack had shown her a kindness she hadn't expected, and in return she felt an inclination to trust him, to let him see who she truly was. It was a slow process, but one that promised a future filled with safety and perhaps even companionship. That night, as the fire crackled and the snow outside settled quietly, the woman allowed herself to rest fully. She leaned back, closing her eyes, and thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this cabin, to this man. Jack watched over her silently, feeling a quiet satisfaction that she was safe and beginning to recover. He knew that the journey ahead would be long and that challenges still awaited, but for now, they had each other, and that was enough. In the quiet of the cabin, two lives intertwined, shaped by courage, survival, and the unexpected connection born from a snowstorm's fury. Days passed since the snowstorm had subsided, and the mountains began to show signs of spring. The thick blanket of snow slowly melted, revealing patches of green grass, frozen streams now trickling with fresh water, and the faint scent of pine carried on the wind. Inside Jack's cabin, life had returned to a quiet rhythm. The woman, whose name was now known to him as Emily, had grown stronger with each passing day. She could walk without stumbling and even help with small chores around the cabin. Yet despite her physical recovery, there remained a quiet tension in her eyes, a hesitancy that spoke of fears she had not yet shared. Jack noticed the change in Emily. She was more comfortable now, smiling more often and engaging in light conversation. He admired the way she had adapted to the harsh conditions outside, and even more, he admired her spirit. It was clear that she had endured hardships that few could imagine, yet she carried herself with dignity and quiet strength. Jack found himself drawn to her, not just because of the gratitude he felt for her survival, but because of the sense of connection that seemed to grow between them with each shared moment. He watched her, often catching himself smiling at her small gestures or the way she laughed at something simple, like a playful squirrel outside the window. One morning, Jack suggested they take a short walk outside. The air was crisp, and the mountains glowed under the soft sunlight. Emily hesitated at first, unsure of how much strength she really had, but Jack's calm encouragement helped her gather courage. "It's safe," he said softly. "Just a little walk. Fresh air will do you good." Emily nodded, gripping the edges of her coat tightly, and together they stepped outside. The snow that had not yet melted crunched beneath their boots, and the wind carried a gentle warmth, a promise of seasons changing. For Emily, this walk felt symbolic, a first step into freedom and safety after weeks of fear and uncertainty. As they walked along a narrow path leading through the edge of the forest, they began talking more openly. Emily shared small pieces of her past, like a favorite tree she had loved climbing as a child, and the songs she used to hum while walking to school. Jack shared memories from his own childhood, growing up on the ranch, learning to ride horses, and tending to the land. They found comfort in these simple stories, each one revealing a little more about who they were beneath the surface. Laughter began to flow easily, replacing the silence that had once been heavy with uncertainty. The snow and ice around them seemed less intimidating, replaced by a sense of peace and shared understanding. Over the next several days, their bond grew stronger. Jack taught Emily how to care for the small herd of cattle, showing her how to recognize when an animal was ill or hungry. She listened carefully, eager to learn, and her diligence impressed Jack. He began to see not only her courage, but also her intelligence and adaptability. Emily, in turn, helped with chores around the cabin, stacking firewood, preparing meals, and keeping the space tidy. These moments, simple as they were, created a rhythm between them, a life of shared effort and mutual respect. It was a connection built not on words alone, but on actions, trust, and understanding. Yet amidst this growing closeness, Emily carried a secret. She was expecting a child, a truth she had not yet shared with Jack. The thought of revealing it terrified her, though she knew it could not stay hidden forever. She worried about his reaction, about whether he would accept responsibility, and whether their growing bond could withstand such news. At night, when she lay in her blanket beside the fire, she thought of the future and the uncertainty it held. The mountains were vast and harsh, but they had also provided safety and warmth. She wondered if the life growing inside her could find security here, with this man who had shown her kindness and courage. Jack, unaware of the secret she carried, continued to watch her with growing admiration. He noticed her attentiveness when learning new tasks, her laughter, and even the quiet moments when she would stare thoughtfully into the fire. There was a patience about her that mirrored his own, a resilience that he found rare and precious. Sometimes he would catch himself imagining a life beyond the cabin, days filled with her presence, evenings by the fire, and a partnership built on mutual respect and care. Yet he kept these thoughts to himself, understanding that Emily needed time to trust fully and that any sense of pressure could shatter the fragile bond they were building. One afternoon, while tending to the cattle, Jack noticed Emily struggling slightly with one of the animals. She had been brushing a stubborn cow, trying to calm it down, but it was not cooperating. He stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said gently. "Sometimes they just need patience. You've done well so far." Emily looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. I'm trying my best." Jack nodded, a quiet smile playing on his lips. He admired her determination, realizing that her strength was not just physical, but emotional as well. This thought lingered in his mind, growing into a quiet appreciation that he couldn't ignore. Evenings in the cabin became their time for reflection and conversation. They would sit by the fire, talking quietly about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. Emily began to share small hopes she had for the future, a life where she could feel safe, a place where she could belong, and perhaps a family of her own one day. Jack listened, never interrupting, letting her words sink in. He realized that she was opening up to him slowly, in her own time, and he respected that immensely. The trust she was showing him was not given lightly, and he understood the responsibility it carried. It was a bond that required patience, care, and understanding, qualities he was more than willing to offer. Despite their growing closeness, the shadow of Emily's secret weighed heavily on her. She feared that revealing she was carrying a child could change everything. The thought of losing the connection they had built, or worse, disappointing Jack, made her anxious. Yet she found comfort in his presence, in the quiet moments when he would check on her, make her laugh, or share a story about his life. These moments reminded her that kindness and patience could exist even in a world filled with danger and uncertainty. She clung to this feeling, hoping that one day she would find the courage to share the truth with him. Jack, meanwhile, continued to feel a sense of responsibility and protectiveness toward Emily. He had saved her life once, and now he wanted to ensure her well-being in every way possible. He watched over her carefully, offering guidance, support, and companionship. There was a growing understanding between them, an unspoken bond that neither had fully acknowledged yet. It was a connection built not on romance alone, but on respect, trust, and shared experiences. The snowstorm that had brought them together was now a distant memory, but its impact remained in the way they relied on and cared for each other. One morning, Jack decided to take Emily to the nearby river, which had begun to thaw with the coming of spring. He wanted her to experience the beauty of the mountains, without the threat of snow or cold. The river sparkled in the sunlight, reflecting the clear blue sky above. Emily stood at the edge, marveling at the sight. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her eyes wide with wonder. Jack smiled, happy to see her smile. "It is," he agreed. "The mountains have their own way of showing us hope, even after the harshest storms." They spent the day walking along the riverbank, talking, laughing, and enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. It was a day of freedom, of joy, and of growing connection. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emily felt a warmth in her heart she hadn't known in years. She realized that her fear was slowly being replaced by trust, hope, and even affection for the man who had saved her life and continued to stand by her. Jack, too, felt a deepening bond, a sense that their lives were intertwined in ways he couldn't yet fully understand. The quiet moments, the shared work, the laughter and stories, They were all building a foundation for something lasting. And though Emily still carried her secret, she sensed that when the time was right, she could reveal it to him without fear. Night fell over the mountains, and they returned to the cabin, tired but content. They sat by the fire, sharing a simple meal, and reflected on the day. Emily felt a quiet courage growing within her, knowing that she had found someone she could rely on, someone whose patience and kindness were unmatched. Jack watched her with a sense of pride and protectiveness, realizing that he cared deeply for her, more than he had expected. Their bond was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, respect, and the beginnings of something far more profound. By the time they went to sleep, a sense of calm had settled over the cabin. The snow was gone from the mountains, replaced by the promise of spring. Emily lay quietly, thinking about the future and the life she could build with Jack's support. Jack, in turn, felt a growing sense of purpose, knowing that he wanted to be part of her life in every way he could. The connection between them had deepened, forged through adversity, patience, and shared experiences. It was a bond that neither could deny, one that promised hope, love, and the possibility of a future together. Spring had fully arrived in the mountains, melting away the last traces of winter. The snow that had once covered the hills and forests was gone, replaced by bright green grass, blooming wildflowers, and streams flowing freely from the thawed ice. The air was fresh and filled with the scent of pine, and birds chirped cheerfully, celebrating the arrival of warmer days. Inside Jack's cabin, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The days were filled with tending to the cattle, preparing meals, and enjoying the simple pleasures of the mountains. Yet beneath this calm, an unspoken tension lingered, carried in Emily's thoughtful glances and quiet moments of reflection. Emily had grown stronger in recent weeks, and Jack noticed the change in her with a mixture of relief and admiration. She was more confident in her movements, more willing to explore, and she laughed more easily at the small, unexpected joys around the cabin. Yet despite this newfound comfort, she had kept a secret that weighed heavily on her heart. The child growing inside her was a truth she could no longer avoid, a truth she knew she had to reveal to Jack sooner or later. But the fear of how he would react, the worry about changing their bond, and the uncertainty of the future made her hesitant. Every time she tried to speak, words seemed to fail her. Jack, meanwhile, had grown increasingly attached to Emily. His admiration for her bravery, intelligence, and quiet strength had evolved into something deeper. He found himself thinking about her when he was alone, imagining a life where she was always by his side. The cabin had become more than a shelter. It had become a place of connection, a safe space where two lives had intertwined in unexpected ways. He could feel that Emily trusted him, that their bond had grown into something rare and precious. Yet he sensed that something lay unspoken between them, a secret that hovered in the quiet moments of their day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows across the cabin floor, Emily gathered her courage. She sat by the fire, her hands folded nervously in her lap, and took a deep breath. Jack noticed her tension and leaned forward slightly, his expression gentle and concerned. "Emily, is something troubling you?" he asked softly. She looked into his eyes, searching for reassurance, and felt a wave of trust wash over her. She knew that he would listen, that he would not judge. The words she had kept hidden for so long were finally ready to be spoken. I need to tell you something," Emily began, her voice trembling slightly. It's not easy for me to say, but I can't keep it from you any longer." Jack's eyes widened slightly, sensing the gravity of her words. He nodded, urging her gently to continue. Emily took another deep breath, gathering strength from the warmth of the fire, and the steady presence of the man before her. I'm carrying a child," she said quietly. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jack blinked, absorbing the revelation, feeling a mixture of surprise, concern, and an unexpected surge of emotion. Emily looked down at her hands, afraid to meet his gaze. I didn't know how to tell you," she admitted. "I was afraid of what you might think, or if it would change everything between us." Jack reached out and gently lifted her chin, encouraging her to look at him. His eyes were filled with understanding, patience, and care. "Emily," he said softly, "this changes nothing about how I feel about you. I'm here for you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek, a mixture of relief and hope flooding her heart. She had feared rejection, but instead, she found acceptance and unwavering support. As the realization settled in, Jack's mind began to piece together the moments from the past. He remembered a brief encounter before Emily had left town months ago, a time of fleeting closeness that had seemed unimportant at the moment. And now everything made sense. The connection they felt, the timing, and the life that was growing within her. A wave of emotion swept over him: joy, responsibility, and an overwhelming desire to protect both Emily and their child. He took her hands in his, holding them firmly yet gently. "Emily," he said, his voice steady, "this child, it's mine, isn't it?" She nodded, a tearful smile forming on her lips. "Yes," she whispered, "it is." The cabin, once a place of refuge from the storm, now became a place of revelation, where truths were shared and hearts were opened. Jack and Emily sat together, holding hands, talking softly about the future. They discussed what it would mean to raise a child in the mountains, the challenges they might face, and the joys they could experience together. Each word strengthened their bond, creating a shared vision of family, love, and hope. The fear that had once haunted Emily began to fade, replaced by a sense of safety and belonging she had never known before. As the night deepened, they reflected on the strange and wonderful way fate had brought them together. A snowstorm that had seemed like a threat had instead become a turning point in their lives. Without it, Emily might never have survived, and their paths might never have crossed. Jack marveled at the irony and beauty of it, realizing that life often worked in mysterious ways, bringing people together when they were meant to be. Emily felt the same, understanding that her journey, her struggles, and even her fears had led her to a place of love and security she had not dared to dream of. In the days that followed, Jack took on a new sense of purpose. He prepared the cabin and the land for the future, making sure everything would be ready for a child. He repaired fences, expanded the small garden, and ensured the cabin was safe and comfortable. Emily, in turn, shared her hopes and dreams for their life together, her trust in Jack growing stronger with each passing day. Together, they planned for a future filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of family. Every small action, every shared task, became a symbol of their commitment to each other and to the life they were creating. Jack also found himself reflecting on the kind of father he wanted to be. He thought about the lessons he would teach, the values he would pass on, and the love he would give unconditionally. The child Emily carried was a promise of new beginnings, a symbol of their bond, and a testament to the strength they had found in each other. Emily, seeing the determination in Jack's eyes, felt a deep sense of relief and gratitude. She realized that she was no longer alone, that they would face every challenge together, and that the future, though uncertain, was bright with possibilities. One afternoon, as the sun shone brightly over the mountains, Jack and Emily sat together outside the cabin, watching the river glisten in the sunlight. Emily rested her hand on her growing belly, feeling the child move within her. Jack placed his hand over hers, smiling softly. "This little one is lucky," he said, "to have a mother as strong as you, and I hope a father who will do his best." Emily laughed softly, tears of happiness brimming in her eyes. "We'll do it together," she replied. "No matter what comes, we'll face it as a family." In that moment, they both understood the depth of their bond, the strength of their love, and the joy that awaited them. The revelation of Emily's pregnancy had changed everything, but in the most beautiful way. Fear and uncertainty had given way to hope, trust, and love. The child growing inside her was not just a new life. It was a symbol of destiny, of the paths that had crossed in the snowstorm, and of the unwavering courage and kindness that had brought them together. Jack and Emily had found more than safety and survival. They had discovered each other, a bond that would guide them through the challenges ahead and fill their lives with purpose and joy. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting a golden glow across the cabin, Emily and Jack sat quietly, holding hands and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The storm, the isolation, and the struggles of the past weeks had led to this revelation, this moment of clarity and commitment. They knew that life would not always be easy, but they were ready to face it together, strengthened by love, trust, and the promise of a new beginning. And in that quiet, beautiful evening, surrounded by the mountains and the soft glow of the fire, they felt a sense of peace and certainty that they had never known before. The first signs of spring had fully transformed the mountains around Jack's cabin. The snow had melted completely, leaving green grass, budding flowers, and streams glistening under the warm sunlight. Birds chirped merrily in the trees, and the air carried the fresh, earthy scent of the mountains. After weeks of storms, isolation, and uncertainty, life had begun to feel calm and promising. Inside the cabin, Jack and Emily were beginning a new chapter together, a chapter filled with hope, love, and the anticipation of the child growing within her. Emily had settled into a comfortable routine, helping with the small household tasks, tending to the fire, and even assisting Jack with some work around the cabin and the small herd of cattle. She moved with ease now, her strength returned, though the gentle curve of her belly reminded her of the life she carried. Jack watched her carefully, full of admiration and tenderness. Every action she took, every word she spoke, seemed to deepen his respect and affection for her. He felt protective, responsible, and more than anything grateful that she had survived the harsh winter and had allowed him to be part of her life. The two of them spent hours planning for the future. They talked about how to prepare the cabin for the arrival of the child, what kind of life they wanted to create, and how they would face challenges together. Jack repaired parts of the cabin, built additional storage for supplies, and even expanded the small garden, envisioning the family life they would share. Emily contributed her ideas, from simple touches to make the home warmer and more inviting, to practical plans for caring for the child once it arrived. The discussions were filled with excitement, laughter, and a deep sense of partnership, marking a new level of closeness between them. Outside, the mountains had never looked more inviting. The thawed river reflected the clear blue sky, and the sunlight danced across the landscape, filling everything with warmth and life. Jack and Emily took long walks together, sometimes talking, sometimes enjoying the silence, the connection between them growing with each shared moment. Emily no longer felt the fear and uncertainty that had dominated her life before. She felt safe, loved, and supported, qualities she had longed for but rarely experienced. Jack, in turn, found a sense of purpose and contentment in their companionship, realizing that their bond had become something stronger than he had ever expected. As the weeks passed, their plans and dreams took shape. They talked about names for the child, about traditions they would follow, and about the values they wanted to instill in their family. Jack found himself reflecting on his own life and the lessons he had learned in the mountains, lessons of courage, patience, and perseverance. Now, he wanted to pass these lessons on to his child, creating a life rooted in honesty, respect, and love. Emily, feeling his sincerity and thoughtfulness, felt a deepening trust in him. Together, they were building not just a home, but a foundation for a life filled with hope and stability. The arrival of spring brought more than warmth. It brought the opportunity to prepare the land and cabin for a new life. Jack worked tirelessly, repairing fences, clearing paths, and ensuring that the cabin was safe and welcoming. Emily assisted where she could, her energy and optimism lifting their shared work into a joyful activity. Even small tasks, like planting seeds in the garden or organizing the cabin's storage, became symbolic of their future together. Each day, they were building a life that reflected love, care, and the promise of new beginnings. Their bond had grown from survival into partnership, trust, and mutual respect. One afternoon, they sat by the river, watching the sun glint off the water. Emily rested her hand on her belly, feeling the child move. Jack placed his hand over hers, a tender gesture that spoke volumes. "I can't wait to meet our little one," he said softly. Emily smiled, feeling warmth and reassurance. "Neither can I," she replied. "I've never felt so safe and happy." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the mountains and the flowing river, they both understood the depth of their connection. It was no longer about the snowstorm that had brought them together, or the dangers they had faced. It was about the life they were creating, the family they were forming, and the love that had grown between them. As the days grew longer, Jack and Emily began to make preparations for the child's arrival. They crafted a small cradle from wood, gathered soft blankets, and made a space in the cabin where the baby could sleep safely. Emily sewed tiny clothes, her hands moving skillfully, while Jack arranged the cabin to ensure comfort and safety. Their efforts were filled with laughter, planning, and occasional playful teasing. These moments strengthened their bond, transforming their cabin into a true home, one filled with warmth, love, and anticipation. It was a home that would soon echo with the laughter and cries of a child, a home built on trust, courage, and shared dreams. Jack also found himself reflecting on the lessons he wanted to teach their child. He thought about the importance of honesty, kindness, courage, and respect for others. He imagined taking the child on walks through the mountains, teaching them about the animals, the land, and the simple joys of life. Emily shared her own hopes, dreaming of a child who would grow up feeling loved, safe, and confident in themselves. Together, they envisioned a family life that combined the best of both their worlds: strength, warmth, and resilience. Every plan, every discussion strengthened their commitment to each other and their unborn child. As the weeks passed, the bond between Jack and Emily grew even stronger. They shared moments of quiet intimacy, simple gestures of affection, and laughter at the small joys of life in the mountains. Emily felt a deep sense of security and love, knowing that Jack would protect her and their child. Jack, in turn, felt a profound sense of responsibility and devotion, realizing that the child was not just a symbol of love, but also a promise of a future he wanted to nurture and protect. Their connection had transformed from survival and gratitude into love, commitment, and a shared vision for the life ahead. Finally, the day arrived when Emily felt the first signs that the child would soon be born. Jack stayed close, calm and steady, guiding her through the process with patience and reassurance. The cabin, once a refuge from a snowstorm, became a place of joy and wonder as they welcomed new life together. Emily held the child in her arms, tears of happiness streaming down her face, while Jack stood beside her, his heart full of love and awe. The moment was one of triumph, love, and the fulfillment of the hopes they had nurtured together. Their journey, from danger, fear, and uncertainty to trust, love, and family, had reached its most beautiful chapter. After the birth, life in the cabin became even richer. Jack and Emily cared for their child with dedication, patience, and unwavering love. They watched the baby grow, learning, laughing, and discovering the world together. The mountains that had once seemed harsh and intimidating now felt like a nurturing home, a place of safety and opportunity. Jack taught the child about courage, honesty, and kindness, while Emily shared lessons of resilience, patience, and hope. Together, they created a family life filled with warmth, joy, and shared purpose. The cabin, once a simple shelter, had transformed into a home where love, trust, and life flourished. Even in the quiet moments, sitting by the fire, watching the sun set over the mountains, or listening to the gentle flow of the river, Jack and Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the snowstorm, the rescue, the trust, and the shared moments of courage and hope. They understood that life could be unpredictable and challenging, but with love, patience, and commitment, they could face anything together. Their child, a symbol of their bond, gave them purpose and joy beyond anything they had imagined. The story of Jack and Emily, of the snowstorm that had changed everything, spread quietly through the small mountain town. Neighbors and friends would later speak of the courage, kindness, and love that had blossomed from an unexpected winter storm. But for Jack and Emily, the story was not about fame or recognition. It was about the family they had built, the trust they had nurtured, and the life they were creating together. Every day brought new challenges and joys, each one a reminder of the bond that had grown from a moment of bravery and compassion in the snow. As the mountains glowed with the golden light of sunset, Jack, Emily, and their child sat together outside the cabin, enjoying the warmth of the evening. The river sparkled in the fading light, birds sang softly, and the air carried the scent of fresh earth and pine. In that moment, surrounded by nature, love, and life, they felt complete. The hardships of the past, the snowstorm, fear, and uncertainty, were behind them. Ahead lay a future filled with hope, family, and endless possibilities. And as they held each other close, they knew that their journey had led them to the most important place of all, home, together.